Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. I'm Ian Stone.
I'm Neil Munro.
So today we're talking about equipment that surveyors carry and surveyors should carry, really. There's some obvious things on the list that you would...
Like Walkmans,
Discmans, MP3 players. You are. That was a ridiculous... That was a ridiculous thing to reference.
It came into my head. I don't know why.
Do you still listen to LPs at home?
Yeah.
So yeah, surveying equipment. There's some obvious stuff that people would think that surveyors would carry, a knife, what have you. But we'll go through it all. But then there's some less obvious equipment as well. So what's at the top of the list?
So I suppose the essentials, really, isn't it? So if you take the asbestos surveyor essentials, is a toolbox.
Yep.
A toolbox to keep all their kit in, basically. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily need to be a box, does it? Or I've seen some surveyors use tool bags.
Yeah.
Just basically a device or something to carry their equipment in.
See, my opinion on that is that it should be a toolbox.
Yeah.
Just because of the areas that we go to as surveyors are disgusting, grubby, horrible, and you're placing the toolbox down in different locations, and it just gets grime and dirt and debris on it.
Yeah, definitely. From an asbestos point of view, you want something that you can decontaminate. So that's
Exactly.
essentially what it should be.
And even if you're placing it in an area that's not asbestos contaminated, you still want to have that toolbox clean and that ability to clean it. Whereas with the tool bags, they're more difficult to clean and keep clean, and it just puts that doubt in my mind of, has that surveyor put their toolbox down on some asbestos? Which it's a rightly so question.
Yeah, I suppose the counter argument to that some of those bags are easy to carry. So from a kind of a manual handling point of view, they're a little bit easier to carry. Yeah, depending on what you're taking.
No, definitely. I mean, it's horses for courses.
Exactly, and depending on what survey you're undertaking would kind of like steer what you actually need. Yeah. Obviously, if you're going to do a basic house management survey, you're less likely to need as much as if you were going to do a commercial and industrial demolition survey.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, just going to do a specific sample of texture coating in a house, you before you've even got there, you know what you need, which isn't all the gear. It's just a handful of items.
Yeah, like a slimmed down version.
Yeah, exactly.
So what sort of stuff would be in the toolbox then, really? I suppose really the key tool for an asbestos surveyor would be some form of Stanley knife, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's kind of most samples are collected by kind of cutting a piece of material and send off for testing.
Yeah, a lot of them are, aren't they?
And they come in all different shapes and sizes, don't they?
Yeah, knives, Stanley knives, ones with retractable blades, one with fixed blades, all sorts. It's kind of down to the surveyor's own opinion on what's best for them, and kind of how they feel comfortable using it. Because some people like a fixed blade because it is fixed. Yeah. Whereas the retractable blade can be awkward in use sometimes.
And it can be a little bit more dangerous because they can kind of retract with a bit of pressure on it.
Yeah, and then you slip and all the rest of it, and before you know it, you've lopped your finger off. Which isn't a good place to be in.
No.
A knife, that's the...
And always good to have spare blades and stuff like that. To keep, because that, like you said, it's having that sharp as well, isn't it? That reduces the risk of sort of accidents. If the blade's sharp and it can cut through the material easily.
Yeah, well, that's it. Chefs say the same, don't they? That a sharp knife is the safest knife.
Yes.
And it's true, because if something's blunt, you start hacking at it.
Applying more pressure.
Yeah, and then, like you say, you'll slip and do yourself probably some damage.
Yeah, probably next probably commonly used tool would be pliers, wouldn't it? Pliers in sort of different shapes and forms, don't they? Needle tip pliers and just straight standard pliers for grabbing samples, snapping samples off. There's a couple of things that probably usually do with those, kind of grind down any grooves.
Definitely, you've got to do that. Yeah, there's still, and that's the thing, that it's kind of a controlled break when you're taking a sample with pliers. But you're right, the grooves, and it's kind of counterintuitive. The fact that you need to grip something, but you've ground down the ribs on it, it seems counterintuitive. But the reason that we do that is because it needs to be decontaminated after. And the fact is, any normal set of pliers, as soon as you apply a little bit of pressure on them, it gets crap enground within them, and from a surveyor's point of view, you need to be sure that it's clean. So the only way to do that is, like you say, to grind off all those ridges on the pliers.
Yeah, I have seen some surveyors use like wet wipes to kind of shield them. Shield the grooves of it. So when you actually put it over the material and then break usually it's like something like asbestos cement, isn't it? Taking the edge off of that, which does work, but I don't think it's 100% foolproof.
No, it's not. I mean, again, you wrap it in a baby wipe, but like I say, as soon as you put in pressure on, the grooves will cut through the baby wipe, and you still end up with cement, asbestos debris in your pliers. So I don't like that.
No, it's not something that we kind of we do or recommend. And then screwdrivers next.
Yeah,
screwdrivers,
whole heap.
Yes, yeah, and all sorts of different, flat nose, posies, and then any other kind of screwdriver that you may come across opening stuff up, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And if you've got some with like changeable heads,
they're quite handy, aren't they? Where you can just have
star key, Allen key ones, anything and everything. If you think about any building, the building that you're in right now, if we were to come and do a refurbishment survey in there, just have a look around at all the different things that are in building. There's on doors, there's screws and things like that'll have to be unscrewed, riser panels, and nobody in construction has ever used the same type of stuff throughout the building.
No, exactly.
So you literally need a whole heap of screwdrivers and bits, so you can
different sizes as well.
Yeah, exactly. You need to get into all these places, and that's the easiest way. It's annoying because no matter how many bits you've got, you'll always find something that's a new one, or you haven't got the right size.
Yeah, exactly. So you essentially need to think about any maintenance, like especially from a management point of view. Obviously, you want to keep the damage to a minimum because it's a non-intrusive survey, but you do need to open up elements where you expect a maintenance person to go. So having the tools to facilitate that is really important. So screwdrivers are quite a big point of tools to have. Next one, core samplers or core borers.
Yeah, core borers. Now, core borers are an interesting one. They're very expensive to buy. However, they are the better ones out there. But the problem with core borers is that they do go blunt very easily and very quickly. And the reason that we use core borers are things like pipe insulation in a plant room or a boiler room. And the purpose of the core borer is to bore all the way through the entire insulation on that pipe down to the metal pipe, because you can have different layers of insulation. Repairs might have happened over the years, so on the outside it's just calcium, which is non-asbestos, but that's been overlaid over asbestos. Or it could even have like a paper lining directly applied onto the metal pipe, but again, that could be under a layer of fiberglass, it could be under a layer of calcium, it could be under a layer of other asbestos. So that's the whole point of the core bore, is to bore all the way through. And when you think about it, so some of the pipes are really, really insulated deeply, aren't they?
Yeah. It's also the safest way of actually collecting that sample from the pipe. It's the safest way to minimise any fibre release from it, rather than actually trying to
hack a piece off.
I was aware of hack a piece of the pipe off. And like you said, trying to get down to ensure that you've got an element of all of every layer of that insulation is really important as well.
Yeah, it is, and that's the thing. Like I said, it's you do get different layers of insulation, and some surveyors will just take a slither off the top. But then, you've sampled that pipe, but you haven't sampled it fully, and that's the whole point.
Yeah. Even if it is asbestos, but like you said, it may have been insulated with more asbestos. So you might actually get different asbestos contents all the way through.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's important to identify that, all elements of that pipe.
Yeah, and like I say, that they are, when you go out to market and buy them, they are expensive. And I think some companies shy away from having proper core borers in their kits for this reason, because they do get really blunt really quickly. You've got like a couple of uses until they need resharpening, and they're a bugger to resharpen. Like if you've ever tried to resharpen your knives at home, that's kind of straightforward, because you get one of the bits of kit and you run the blade through it, and it's normally okay. You get a decent edge on it, but because of it's a core borer, it's a circular thing, and all the way around needs that edge. So to actually get that all the way around to be a perfect kind of knife blade, it's really, really difficult to achieve. And like I was saying, some of the pipes are really thickly insulated as well. So it's not just the case of having like a little small sort of 4 or 6 inch core borer. You need something a whole lot bigger than that on some of the bigger pipes.
Yeah, definitely. So what else can you have in there? Some surveyors like to have chisels.
Mm-hmm.
Chisels from a couple of points of views, really. Sometimes a chisel, if you've got a sharp chisel, it's easy to kind of take a scraping sample of, say, textured coating on the ceiling, or using the chisels, obviously, to open stuff up.
Yeah.
Sometimes can be handy, can't they?
Yeah, definitely.
Other tools in the box, you may need crowbars.
Definitely, crowbars are
of all sort of sizes.
Yeah, refurb and demos, different type of crowbars. It's funny, right? Because anyone listening, it's like a crowbar's a crowbar.
Yeah.
A set of screwdrivers, but they're not. If you've ever been into like B&Q or any of the hardware stores, just have a look. There's just millions and millions of different ones, and crowbars is a funny one because you've got little, really tiny little wedge bars, little gemmy bars. You've got like larger ones with flat ends. You've got the ones with the hook ends.
Yeah.
And they all serve a different purpose. And on refurbs and demos, they are imperative that you use them. They're a real big part of the kit.
Even on a management survey, like them little, like you said, gemmy bars. If you've got a riser panel you need to get into, and it's all the screws are out. Sometimes you need that. Just that little bar bit, just to prise it open.
Yeah, just to give that pressure.
It's so fit, so flush. You need that little bit of to give it out. So what else can we have in there? The toolbox, torch, definitely the torch. That's kind of one of the key tools, really, isn't it?
Definitely.
You really do need a torch. Even in inspecting a lit room, sometimes can be handy just to really shine the light on a location that you really need to inspect properly. Definitely.
And again, since we started in the industry, torches have come on.
Mag lights.
Yeah, mag lights.
Which D batteries.
D batteries, huge, heavy. They were good.
Yeah.
However, if you knocked it, the bulb would pop.
Yeah.
And you'd be screwed, because if you keep hitting it, you've got to keep replacing the bulb.
Walking around with it like slamming on your leg all the time.
Exactly.
You've got it on a belt hook.
Yeah, and it needed like 3-4 D-cell batteries to give it enough power.
Yeah.
And from a light point of view, it was good. The torches that are about now are a lot better because they're brighter, they're kind of LED, and they've got better bulbs, they take more of a knock, so from that standpoint, they're much better. However, some of them give off like a bit of a blue light, and it's funny, when you're surveying with them, everything looks like asbestos. You can shine a light on something as simple as plasterboard, and all of a sudden it looks like AIB, because it's got that kind of, it just makes everything look like that
grey tinge.
Yeah, that grey tinge on stuff. So they can be annoying.
Yeah,
so you have to find the right torch.
I was going to say, it's just selecting that right bulb, isn't it, and the right light.
Yeah.
That they sort of generate. But you can get a decent, like, light up a whole ceiling void torch that just is easily fits in your hand and in your pocket.
Yeah.
As opposed to when back when we started, you had a
surveying by candlelight,
4D mag light,
which
is like really heavy.
I mean, on lighting, that's kind of an important one, because it's not just what you're carrying, and it's where you're surveying. Because some buildings, if you're doing refurbs and demos, everything will be isolated, so all the power will be off. Yeah. So it's what other lighting equipment. Do you need to string up festoon of lights through the building? Can you use the portable lights? Are they good enough so you can see everything?
And again, they've got better as well.
They have,
they?
yeah.
You can get reasonably priced, decent like flashlights and
task lights.
Task lights, that's the word.
Yeah.
That light up. With a couple of them, you can light up a whole room.
Yeah.
And they're easy to carry around, and they're rechargeable and stuff. So,
but again, that is kind of outside of the normal gear that a surveyor carry. That comes into site specific, the pre-contract review, planning the works, and making sure you've got everything you need to do a survey. Just thinking about going back on the refurb one, you'd look at possibly things, demo bars and hammers.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'd probably want a claw hammer in for your management kit, wouldn't you? But definitely, bigger heavy duty on your refurb. And
you'd want that on some sites just because of the rats that we see and things, and just a bit of protection.
Yeah, that's where the mag light came in as well, though, wasn't it? So they were good. What other tools can you have in there?
Not a tool, but a part of the surveyor's kit is the spray bottle, water spray. Definitely needs to have a spray in there for spraying samples down before samples are collected.
Yeah.
And also
something to seal it.
Yeah, and also, I was just going to say, a separate container where you carry some additional water, because again, we go from different sites, and some sites we rock up to, there isn't water on site because services are isolated.
Yeah.
So it's all this part of pre-planning and making sure you've kind of got everything and spares. And it sounds silly, but an extra bottle of water will saves you hours on site. If you rock up somewhere you don't know where the local garage is, you have to drive around to find a shop, or the rest of it. So little things like that are really good. Yeah. But going on to what you just said, something to seal where you've sampled. Now that can be from tapes, paints, PVA, anything like that really.
Yeah.
Spray adhesives.
Yeah.
It all depends on the material that you're sampling, what's been agreed with the client, what's going back. On refurbs and stuff, if people are looking to kind of reoccupy an area, boards and tiles and anything like that to cover over any damage that you've created. Because obviously, if you're, I don't know, for instance, if you've made a hole in a wall as part of a survey and the actual works aren't going to be happening for some weeks, well, we don't just walk away from site and leave a big hole in the wall, because that's not really, it's not acceptable. It's not safe from other people using it. People can get hurt from going back into these areas. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Polythene bags, so sample bags.
Yeah, sample bags, all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, standard sort of smaller ones for samples, and then bigger ones for actually collecting up, all the samples that you've taken. Mm-hmm. Also, you probably want some wet wipes as well, wouldn't you? For a couple of reasons: clean your equipment, helping suppress asbestos fibre, doing cleanups where you've sampling locations, etc. Really use sort of universal material and product to use to take out with you. Surveyors have to have wet wipes, really.
Yeah, exactly.
You can get away with having tissue and using water, but it's kind of not the same.
It's no good.
It breaks down.
Yeah.
Wet wipes are designed for what they're used for.
Yeah.
And they're kind of meshed together so they don't break.
And another thing as well is antibacterial wipes. Again, one, you want them for your mask after you've been wearing your mask. Each time you use it, you need to, it's not only about decontaminating everything, but it's making it clean and safer next time.
Yeah, that's it.
You don't, obviously, if you're breathing into this mask, it becomes a hub of bacteria. Yeah. If you just leave it in your box, mold will grow, and it's just not good. It's not.
Yeah, you do. You get that build up of basically mouth juice in your mask, don't you? Because
if you wear a mask for any period of time, and I'm talking like down to 5 minutes, you'll take the mask off, and it'll just be water droplets all in it, because it's all condensation from you breathing out. And like I say, if you just leave that, it's not good. It's a breeding ground for bacteria, basically.
So they need to be fully cleaned out. Warning signs.
Yeah, warning signs, that's a biggie.
Warning signs. So where you're collecting samples, so you've got, you can warn people that not to come into your location where you're collecting those samples. And maybe some barrier tape as well, just in case, you need to exclude an area. while you're sampling, to prevent people kind of coming and disturbing you and coming into contact with you.
And also with barrier tape, that's another really good part of the consultant's toolkit, because if you find something untoward on site and there's an area that you've identified damaged asbestos, which happens every day, there's not a single day where our surveyors isn't finding something that's been damaged that either the client didn't know about or was kind of unaware of. So you need the barrier tape just to create a nice demarcation zone around it. So again, we can make that area safe and make sure people aren't going into this area to disturb asbestos.
Piece of polythene.
Yes.
So polythene for putting down over surfaces or to protect them where you're collecting a sample, because it's then easier to clean up if debris does come away from that sample.
Yeah, exactly. That's massively important, because when you're sampling over anything, I mean, if you were sampling on a linoleum floor, you can clean up after yourself very easily. If you're sampling over a carpet floor and debris falls, well, you're screwed, because you can't pick out bits of debris from a carpet. So that's a massive piece of equipment that's kind of so simple but really important.
Stuff like you may have a waste bag as well, just in case there's somewhere to put any overalls, and obviously you'd need overalls and additional overalls depending on the type of survey, but depending on what you're sampling, you may need to put on full RPE and PPE.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this week, one of our surveyors went out to a house. I call it a house. It was a huge mansion type place. And the client had provided photos to us before we went as part of our kind of pre-contract review. And just in the photographs alone, it didn't look good. So we obviously passed that information on to the surveyor, and they donned all of their PPE and RPE before they went into this kind of basement cellar area. And we're so glad that she did, because all the samples came back as asbestos. There was a lot of asbestos damaged. It was pipe insulation all over everywhere. And without that kind of information and without that equipment, I've got no doubt in my mind that she was walking into an area and would have been exposed to asbestos. So that's a massive part of the equipment.
So surveyors should be carrying ample supplies of this, because you just never know when you may need to put it on multiple times during a survey.
That's what I was just going to say. You definitely do need a lot, because after she'd been into this cellar, she had to go and survey other parts of this property. But because she'd been into this contaminated space, it wasn't like she's going to walk out and then just bowl around the place, because she's potentially contaminated. So it was that point of leaving, taking off that gear and changing it for new gear to go and survey the other areas.
So other stuff you could have, if you're collecting data, you may need to have a device for that. So that could be your phone, a tablet, even a laptop, depending on how you do it. If you're recording information on paper, so for instance, if you're drawing plans, or you may even be writing it on paper, you obviously need adequate paper, sheets, whatever you use, pens, to make sure you can record all that element. Pens are really important, obviously, because you need to write on sample bags for sample numbers, collecting that information, and having spares. Access equipment then as well, so some form of ladder. Whether that be step ladder, steps, whatever, some sort of access equipment, depending on what your company does. But that's really important of assessing the risk, and you may need to be working in teams to ensure that you can access high level areas for that survey. Other equipment would be HR vacuum cleaner. That would be important to have, particularly on the refurbishment and demolition surveys where you're opening stuff up. Again, sometimes when you're breaking into ceiling voids, wall voids, floor voids, you don't necessarily know what you're breaking into.
No, you need it in case of emergency, and you also need it just to be professional after you've been into some of these areas. Like I said earlier, if a refurb survey is going to be reoccupied, well, it's just good practice to tidy up after yourself before the client's re-accessing. Some other equipment it's inherent risks that are on site. So is there anything on site that the clients require you to have or to wear? Certain things like hairnets, or a certain type or colour of Wellington boot because you might be going into areas such as for food prep or things like that. White lab jackets, those types of things.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're opening up to the kind of PPE stuff, is as a minimum you'd be expecting to have boots on. Really,
Yeah.
you shouldn't really be doing any survey without boots.
Boots, high-vis hard hat.
Yeah, they're the basics, aren't they?
Yeah.
You may need eye protection, ear protection, gloves.
It all depends, and that's the thing. On every site, it's different, and that's why not necessarily equipment, but part of the surveying process is to always do the risk assessments and identify from the client. So if you've ever been barraged with a load of questions, that's the reason why. They're trying to find out and identify what they're going to face when they come to site, so they can pre-plan it and make sure they've got the right equipment and they've got the right risk assessments for coming to do work at your site.
Yeah, and additionally that may include like high level access equipment, for instance towers, cherry pickers, scissor lifts, and then having the associated like PPE and RPE for accessing and using those types of equipment.
I mean, there's some other random ones as well that we've employed and used over the years, such as gas monitors.
Yeah.
For going into
confined spaces.
Yeah, confined spaces, ducts, really restrictive areas, things like that. Life jackets when we've surveyed near water, locks and other things like that, sluices, sluice gates, those types of things. Again, it's all these kind of different risks that come in. So yes, there's a core asbestos surveyor's kit, which is bags, knives, screwdrivers, wet wipes, spray bottle. But then outside of that, there's a whole host of other equipment that we are asked to and we need to employ sometimes, and that's the thing. You need a surveying organisation that's got a robust system to make sure that they're coming to your site safely and they are carrying everything they should carry, because at the end of the day we want everybody to come home like they went to work. We don't want incidents to happen, we don't want injuries to happen, we want everybody safe, and everybody wants that at the end of the day.
Yeah, well I hope you found that useful. Remember, asbestos first, not last.